Welcome to r/entitled people, where we share stories from your lives about people who think the rules don't apply to them, and they should get what they want. Thank you, friends, for subscribing to the channel, and for so many likes. And today we have 3 great stories, so subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. The first story. General manager was toxic to the point that my head chef befriended her, secretary fed her heaps of sugar and fats, she went up 2 sizes before her wedding. She had a blowout at her wedding and it got canceled. The second story. The scammer introduces himself as a VIP guest and vice president of the company and wants to get a number for free, but no. The third story. The title manager was like, "We don't have enough people, so we're going to fire you for going home when we told you to." The first story is how my boss ruined a manager's wedding because she was toxic. More than 10 years ago, when I started my apprenticeship, I joined this restaurant. I have no idea how anything goes. I've only been a kitchen hand for a year at 2 other venues, but this place I started working at was completely different on how things were run. My boss, head chef at the time, was a real laid-back and easygoing person. He always tried to avoid conflicts or arguments with employees and customers, or diffuse it quickly as possible. Now he only worked there for a year before I joined. The general manager, front of house not kitchen, worked there the longest for 5 years. She used to be HR until she got promoted at 6 months in after my boss joined. Apparently she used to be cool, but soon after she got to be GM, she became a living nightmare to work with, while the owner just ignored her, and only has kept her because she's been there the longest, and she knows how to run the restaurant, except the kitchen. So this gives the owner lots of time to go on vacation and deal with other venues he owns. Let's call my boss, Chilled Boss, and the GM Toxic B. There's 4 other people in this story. The sous chef who's second in charge of the kitchen, we'll call him Junior. 3 front of the house servers, let's just say Alpha, Beta, and Copper. Now, from the first day, Toxic B kept making do jobs, which isn't part of my workload, but I didn't know better, and when Junior found out, he told me to stop and took me to have a quick meeting with Chilled Boss, to tell me that whenever Toxic B asks me to do anything, to make sure to say, "Can you just double check with the head chef? Because he has me doing other jobs, which are more important, and it isn't really part of my job, just so she can get off my back." It lasted for 3 days before she went back at it. I'm the type to give people the benefit of a doubt, but they told me stories just in the 6 months she got promoted. She's made 2 employees have a mental breakdown and quit or fired. The new HR used to be her best friend at work until she realized how crazy she really is and don't speak. She forced Alpha to work on his family member's funeral because she thinks that's not a good enough excuse to not work the weekend. Other managers hate her, but since she's in charge, we all keep our mouths shut. Apparently they tried before to talk to the owner about her, and during that time she had a freak out because she felt everyone was attacking her, and so they dropped it, gave her 2 weeks off and paid so she doesn't sue. Owner was going through a divorce or something, so he didn't want this on his plate. After 3 painful months of working there, me, Junior, Beta, and Copper all got pretty close, and we hang out after work to have a few drinks. We get 2 free house alcoholic drinks after work. Now for some reason Toxic B was getting mad at us, and told us that anyone from the kitchen had to pay. Junior and Copper kept asking why, and she said because the kitchen and bartenders, Copper's section, are on different payrolls than the servers. Junior said, "If this is the case, then we don't need to do jobs for you every now and then." She flipped out saying she's the GM, and her word is law. Yes, she did say that. Now Junior said she's not GM of the kitchen, and that Chilled Boss is in charge. Hasmail's the choice from staff hiring, food ordering, menus and such, because the owner trusts Chilled Boss. She refused to listen and fired Junior, saying he's stealing on other baseless grounds. He smiles and walks off. Copper texts Chilled Boss straight away about it, and I just walked out of the venue hoping he really isn't fired, because I would have set up by myself in the morning. Next day, got to work in the morning and Chilled Boss is in, which I was glad, but also remembered it was his day off. He's on the phone with the owner, Copper and HR standing next to him. He was on the phone trying to convince the owner to make GM undo her decision, and convince Junior to come back. Owner said he'll talk to her, but he highly doubts it. After the phone call, HR says, "I can't believe someone had the balls to ask her to marry her." We all laugh except Chilled Boss. He thought of something. He told us to keep our heads down, be nice to Toxic B from now on, and don't set her off for a long while. We looked confused and went on with our day. In the afternoon, he made a cupcake, which was kinda confusing, because I thought he was making a whole batch with the amount of ingredients he used, but he made one. He walked over to Toxic B and said, "This here's a truce. Let's hope we can be friends." She replies, "Whatever, sure," and snatches it and eats it. Then she finishes her shift and went home. Copper comes over and asks why Chilled Boss is being nice. Chilled Boss tells us that HR told him her wedding is in 8 months. She already got her dress fitted. Mind you, Toxic B's body type was fit, but she had a thick thighs and A. And he planned to give her food every day with extra fat, sugar, salt, oil, whatever that makes you gain weight, you name it. 3 to 4 times a week he would make special batches of food for her and she never noticed. This went on for 3 to 4 months until she started stressing out at work. By this time, Toxic B has opened up a bit to Chilled Boss, not knowing what he was doing. She said she can't fit in some of her clothes anymore because she went up 2 sizes, and her wedding is approaching. He told her for the next few months he'll only make her healthy food if she wanted. She got offended at Chilled Boss for implying she's fat, even though she said she went up 2 sizes. After Chilled Boss calmed her down, she agreed. The food he made only looked healthy. After another 2 months, her weight was the same. It didn't go down and now she started to freak out even more and started crying randomly at work. Chilled Boss stopped giving her special foods and started to give her proper healthy foods. She asked why it tasted different and he would say different recipe, or it's made for vegans. No lie there, haha. But she stopped exercising and just started to eat her feelings away. I transferred 1 month before her wedding because it was part of my rotation in my apprenticeship. I asked Beta and Copper what happened on her wedding day. Chilled Boss finally told her the truth by calling her on her wedding day. She was able to drop 1 size down, but still had to get her dress refitted for her wedding. We don't know if she flipped out at her wedding or not because no one went from that venue went. She did invite the staff and expected everyone to be there who wasn't working. She did call the owner to demand that Chilled Boss be fired, but since there was no evidence of this ever happening, he stayed. Toxic B had a meltdown on the phone with the owner day of her wedding. Apparently this was the cherry on top, because soon-to-be husband didn't want to go through with it because it's been hell for him. Apparently was only in it for the visa. So wedding was called off and she quit by text message the next day. Oh, Junior had his job back a few days after he was fired. They just were never rostered on the same day. Working in food industry for more than 10 years, I've seen and heard so many revenge stories, but this has to be my favorite. The second story is the V.I.P. from Gemini Solutions Limited. I'm coming into work in the evening shift for my hotel. At our property it's very quiet, only 4 arrivals with 10 people in-house. I'm gonna be bored and I'm loving it. Cue the phone call. The person on the line is named Mr. Hand. Now this one's interesting. As soon as I get through my standard greeting, Mr. Hand immediately launches into a bunch of random tangents about various things. His reservation was missing, not coming up, how he's a VIP guest, how his company is named Gemini Solutions, and he's the vice president, the room type he was expecting, hot tub spa, extra towels, couch in the room, king bed, etc. How he was disappointed in our hotel for dropping the ball. I'm like, whoa, slow down. One thing at a time, dude. I tell him that I'm literally just coming on my shift, and to let me sift through what he just told me. While he was annoyed, possibly for good reason, he did start talking more coherently. Essentially, he says that we made a booking for him for our best room in-house, a king suite, and that he can't find his booking at all. So I try to find it. Can't. It's not in the system, either in the future or in the past. I let Mr. Hand know and he says, tell you what, let's make it easier for you. Just make me a new reservation. I'm like, sure, no problem. I quote him the rate and he agrees. However, just as I'm getting his info into the reservation, it cuts off. It was like he muted himself. So I took down his number and tried calling him back. It rang several times before going into a full messaging system that was unnamed. Whatever, I went ahead and made his reservation with the info I did have for him, because I knew he was probably going to show up. I also contacted my morning shift coworker Alice about Mr. Hand's accusations with his reservation woes. She told me that she doesn't recognize Mr. Hand, but she does recall an entitled-sounding person calling her about the best room in the hotel. They allegedly asked for the best amenities some hotels offer, like hot tubs, spas, plush towels, etc. They hung up on her when she told them our king suite only had a couch. I also contact similarly branded hotels in my area to see if Mr. Hand possibly made the wrong reservation elsewhere. No dice. Just as I'm finished researching this issue, Mr. Hand does come in, and he doesn't quite look like the VIP vice president of Gemini Solutions Limited, let me tell you. He has a gangster cap on, unshaven, sporty type clothing. He's a little on the short side, white, but that doesn't matter other than to paint the scene. So he introduces himself and goes through the same issues he mentioned on the phone. I told him that I did create a partial reservation for him, but his cell phone cut out midway. He says his phone died on him. In my head, that was a major red flag. His cell phone rang multiple times before going into voicemail, where a turned-off phone would redirect a voicemail immediately. I say that's no problem. Let's just finish the reservation here and now. I ask him for his ID and credit card. Mr. Hand doesn't pull out his ID at all. He mentions that my coworker Alice, who he could not name, specifically told him that his room and tax was already paid for. He mentioned that our hotel was to be getting an email from Gemini Solutions with their card, that he was just supposed to show ID and be let into his room. Now, I know Alice. She's very thorough, and I trust her when she says she didn't specifically deal with a VIP guest. I asked Mr. Hand if he potentially called someone else, because you see I spoke with Alice. Nope, he's adamant that he called the same number as he used to call me. Fair enough. I just tell Mr. Hand that I'm very surprised, because Alice knows that our policy is to get cards physically on file when the guest arrives. To prevent fraud, you see. Mr. Hand is not too pleased. Well, you have to fix this. Clearly your hotel made a mistake, so make it right. Right. I point blank told Mr. Hand that with the information that I have right now, I'll need to follow hotel policy with this reservation. I need a physical card, and by the way, I need an ID. He leaves saying he'll get to the bottom of it, post a complaint, and I'll be hearing from him soon. Yeah, right, buddy. I do ask him if he wants to cancel his reservation, and he says yes as the doors shut behind him. Get this, folks. I see Mr. Hand leaving in the ugliest vehicle in the lot. While I'm sure some VPs of companies don't have good vehicles, the kicker was when a person waiting from outside of the hotel quietly got into Mr. Hand's vehicle before they took off. They looked completely unrelated from each other, and the new individual, who didn't even come in, looked homeless. My guess was that Mr. Hand was attempting to strong-arm himself into a free room with a fraudulent card that's not traced to him, so he can set up camp and do God knows what with his pal. Yikes. Crisis averted. And the last story is, put in my 2 weeks and got fired instead. Yesterday, my husband and I that work at the same resort decided to put in our 2 weeks. Our power trip manager forced us to overserve drunk people drinks after we were closed, clapped in my face when I refused and said, I'm the effing manager and you're the effing bartender. You make what I tell you. Anyways, we emailed our GM 2 weeks notice and told our a-hole AGM when we got to our shift. His response to my husband was, why not make it effective immediately? You can go home. My husband went to HR. Meanwhile, I was setting up with a bartender who came in on his day off to help me, since our other bartender quit. He had worked 15 hours the day before to help them since we were short-staffed. My manager called him a baby for complaining about long hours, because he made good money. I went to HR about this, and my manager told me he was removing me for the evening too. I asked why, and he said I left the floor when I went to HR. I refused because it was screwing over the guy who came in to help me. The bartender felt so betrayed that they were willing to screw him. He decided to leave and I followed. Figured I'd been sent home prior anyway, so I'm just going along with what he wanted. They had to partially close our area and completely close my husband's bar. Today they pulled me aside and said I put our operation in jeopardy by leaving, but I explained it was at the request of my manager. They didn't want to accept this and terminated me. I was dreading going in for 2 weeks, as we're extremely understaffed, so they did me a huge favor. Subscribe, hit the like button, and have a good day.